I'm VJ Hamilton and welcome to the Autoimmune RESET, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Autoimmune RESET podcast. I'm your host, VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist and expert in autoimmune disease. And today we're diving deep into primary biliary cholangitis, which is also known as PBC. And it's a chronic autoimmune condition that primarily affects the liver. And I am seeing more and more clients with this condition, which, to be honest, when I first started out, I hadn't actually heard of it. And then I started working with women in their 40s and 50s who are coming to me with this diagnosis. And more recently, there have been a lot of people who have contacted me who have been diagnosed with this condition. So it seems to be on the rise. I'm going to be sharing insights into the root cause of PBC, the symptoms and natural therapies. And we'll also touch on some lesser known connections like the links between PBC, fatty liver, high cholesterol, and some recent findings that challenge the conventional approach. Let's get started with understanding what PBC is. Now, primary biliary cholangitis is an autoimmune disease and it specifically targets the small bile ducts in the liver. And these ducts are responsible for transporting bile, which aids in digesting fats and removing toxins from the body. And one of the things that I look at when I am working with a client and they have done a stool test is looking at how well they're breaking down fats. And this can be an initial indication if there is an issue with the liver or with the gallbladder. If somebody is not breaking down fats as well as they should be, there can be other reasons for that as well, but that can be an indication that there is something going on with the bile, with the gallbladder, with the liver, and you do see it a lot in PBC as well. Now, as with other autoimmune conditions, the immune system mistakenly attacks those ducts and the bile becomes trapped in the liver, and that causes inflammation and progressive damage. And over time, that can lead to some scarring. In severe cases, it can lead to cirrhosis, which is a condition where the liver tissue is replaced by scar tissue, and that can impair the liver function. And that's why it is so important to get ahead of it. If you have PBC or if you have any symptoms related to PBC, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So as I mentioned, PBC primarily affects women, with about 90% of cases occurring in women, most commonly between the ages about 40 and 60. And we don't know why there is this gender disparity and it's not fully understood. And again, that is the same for a lot of different autoimmune conditions, which seem to be predominantly in women. But it does suggest that there could be a hormonal influence, particularly estrogen, because if we're thinking about that time of life, that is when estrogen is declining. Estrogen does play a role in modulating the immune response, so making sure that the immune system doesn't start targeting self-tissue. And that might be why women between the ages of 40 and 60 are more susceptible to this condition. Again, as with other autoimmune conditions, genetics can also contribute to the risks of developing PBC. So if you do have a family history of PBC or other autoimmune conditions, then it is more likely that you will develop this disease. But when it comes to genetics, I always say this, it's to do with the environment that those genes are put into. And when I say environment, I mean the diet that you're eating, the air that you're breathing, the products that you're putting on your skin, the stress that you're feeling. There's many other factors, and there is certainly a genetic susceptibility to these conditions, but it isn't always the case that just because you've got certain genetics that they will develop into these conditions. But I think if you have family members who have PBC or other autoimmune conditions, it's important to be proactive. And even though I was diagnosed with several autoimmune conditions, I have always been proactive because I know I have this family history of autoimmune conditions as well, and that's what drives me even today, because you can be diagnosed with an autoimmune disease at any age, and different autoimmune diseases affect different people, but also you are more at risk when you have one autoimmune disease of developing others. And that's another reason why I am quite motivated, doing everything that I can to keep my health as good as it can be, and that's what I would like for you as well. But PBC is closely linked to other autoimmune conditions. For example, approximately 70% of individuals with PBC also have Sjögren's syndrome, which is a disorder that causes severe dryness in the eyes and mouth. And I have done a podcast episode on Sjögren's syndrome, so you can go back and listen to that if you'd like to find out more about that particular condition. But it is something that I always suspected might have been an issue for me. And you can hear more about that in that other podcast episode. So have a look back and give that a listen if you are not familiar with Sjögren's syndrome. Thyroid disorders such as Hashimoto's thyroiditis and Graves' disease are also common in PBC. And additionally, PBC can coexist with systemic sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and celiac disease. So if you have any of these conditions and you are noticing symptoms of PBC, then it might be worth getting checked, because there is this association with PBC. One of the underappreciated factors in PBC is the role of the detoxification pathways. When I'm working with clients with autoimmune disease, I'm not just thinking about their immune system, although that is very important, but also these other systems in the body that can go out of sync or there might be problems with. But specifically when I'm working with somebody with an autoimmune liver condition, I am thinking, well, what's going on with their detoxification? Because we know toxicity massively affects the liver. And the glutathione pathway is one of the body's most important mechanisms for neutralizing toxins and protecting cells from oxidative stress. And there are mutations in genes like GSTM1 or GSTP1, which means that you are less likely to produce glutathione. It can compromise the pathways and it can leave your liver more vulnerable to damage. And I ran a genetic test on myself many years ago, and I found that I had a deletion of one of my glutathione genes, and that just means that I have a higher need for glutathione than the next person because I lack a gene that helps me in producing glutathione. And when I have clients that do genetic testing with me, and it is a test that I offer in my clinic, I often find that they have a deletion in this gene. Now, detoxification is dependent on various different systems in the body, because we have two phases of detoxification. We have phase 1, and phase 1 creates these metabolites which are extremely reactive, and then we have phase 2, and phase 2 is really how we're detoxing those very reactive metabolites out of the body. And we also have digestion, which is almost like phase 3 of detoxification. But there are various different methods that the body uses in phase 2. So one of them is glutathione, but we also have a pathway which is called the transsulfuration pathway. And that converts homocysteine into cysteine, which is a precursor for glutathione. And this can further impact and impair detoxification. So it's just worth bearing these genetics in mind, and this is why genetic testing can be so insightful, especially when you know that you potentially have low amounts of glutathione and you want to understand what the underlying cause is. If you find out that you have specific genetic variations, then you know that that might be a factor for you, and you can just keep on top of that, and that again can help with health maintenance and making sure that you stay healthy, but it can also help with taking a personalised approach when you are recovering from an autoimmune condition. Now, the thing about PBC is it's often referred to as a silent disease, and that's because its symptoms can be subtle in the early stages. Some of the most common early signs are fatigue and itching, which in some cases can be severe and debilitating. The fatigue associated with PBT is thought to stem from mitochondrial dysfunction, which is another thing that I will test my clients for. The way that they diagnose PBC, which we'll be touching on, is to look at antibodies to the mitochondria. So it's a significant part of this condition, and the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, so it's how your body produces energy. But when there is this mitochondrial dysfunction, the liver doesn't have the energy to do the role that it normally does. It means that it has an inability to clear toxins efficiently and places extra stress on the liver and the detox symptoms. The itching, on the other hand, is believed to be the result of the buildup of bile acids in the bloodstream, and that can cause itchy skin. But as the disease progresses, there can be other symptoms that can become more pronounced, and that includes things like dry eyes and mouth, and that can often be linked to the coexisting Sjögren syndrome. There can be jaundice or yellowing of the skin or eyes, which can be caused by elevated bilirubin levels. Another symptom might be dark urine and pale stools, because that can indicate that there is that bile duct obstruction. And then you may have an enlarged liver or spleen. Now, obviously, you're not going to be able to determine that yourself, but that can also be a symptom. A major misconception when it comes to PBC is its confusion with alcohol-related liver disease. And this can be quite a stigma for somebody that is diagnosed with PBC. And I often have clients say to me they don't drink very much, or they might have even given up alcohol, and then they get diagnosed with PBC. And a lot of the time when we hear about liver disease, we think straight away about alcohol. But the truth is, there is more and more research showing that things like fatty liver disease and other liver conditions aren't related to alcohol. And yes, there are some that are related to alcohol, but there are lots of people who are being diagnosed with certain liver conditions and it is unrelated to alcohol. But another lesser known fact is that PBC is also associated with metabolic complications such as fatty liver and high cholesterol. So it might be that you have gone for a full blood count at the doctor's, you've just gone for a regular health check with your doctor, and your cholesterol levels are really high and you don't know why. And obviously your doctor can explore that for you, but that can be a symptom of this condition, because if your liver is so important in regulating your cholesterol levels, and if there is a high burden on the liver, if there's toxicity, if the energy system isn't working well in the liver, then that can cause this issue with cholesterol. And again, with cholesterol, I could probably do a whole podcast episode on that. Cholesterol really isn't about the fat we're eating, it's about how well our liver is regulating cholesterol. That can be linked to our blood sugar regulation. And yes, in some instances, it could be to do with an extremely high fat diet for some. But for the most part, in my clinical practice, I'm seeing it more when people have an issue regulating their blood sugar or metabolic issues, or they have toxicity or issues with their liver. So let's move on and let's talk about lab testing for diagnosing PBC, but also some of the functional assessments that you can do. Now, if you go to your doctor and they suspect PBC, they may run blood tests for you that are going to test for those liver enzymes. So elevated levels of ALP and GGT are hallmark signs of PBC. And GGT I don't find is tested as much on a routine check, but it's a helpful marker when you are looking for toxicity in the body. And when I'm working with clients who might have heavy metal toxicity and we've gone through a detox protocol, it is a marker that I will use to check in to see the success of that protocol. So I find it a very useful marker to use in my clinical assessment of my client's health. The other thing that is tested for are these anti-mitochondrial antibodies, which are found in about 95% of PBC patients. So that is the one that is tested for, and that is the key diagnostic marker. And one of the frustrations with any autoimmune disease is being diagnosed with the condition, and many people will have these symptoms for years without getting an official diagnosis. With PBC, at least you have this antibody that is very specific for that condition. But you can also run liver function tests as well, which will test for bilirubin. It may test for clotting factors and albumin, and that's just going to give you a really good idea about your liver health and whether there are any issues there. Then your doctor might use an ultrasound, which can rule out other causes of bile duct obstruction, such as gallstones. And there is also MRI, which is going to provide imagery of the bile ducts to identify where there are blockages and structural abnormalities. Now, that's what you can do with your doctors. As a functional medicine practitioner, I like to dig into some of the underlying systems that might be contributing to my client's symptoms of PBC. My go-to really for somebody with PBC is to run a stool analysis, because there is a link between gut dysbiosis and PBC. I wrote an article about the link between gut dysbiosis and autoimmune liver conditions, which I will link to in the show notes, so you can read through that if you want a bit more information about that. I will also run my metabolomics panel, which is what I call my cell health test, because again, that's going to evaluate mitochondrial function. It's going to look at their detox pathways, their oxidative stress levels, so I can really see which area is affecting them the most and which area we need to focus on in order for my client to see the most benefits. You can also do genetic testing. As I said, I found that extremely helpful in my own health. And then you're going to know whether you have weaknesses in certain genes. So you know you need to adapt your diet and lifestyle dependent on those genetics. And honestly, I still go back to my genetic tests, because they're tests that you will have for life. They're tests that are going to give you that insight into your own body, so you can start taking a personalised approach when it comes to your health. And I think this is the future. We're going to understand our gut microbiome, we're going to understand our genetics, and we're going to understand what is right for us. So that's a really helpful test as well. And then you can do some nutrient testing, which is part of the metabolomics panel that I run, to understand whether nutrients and minerals that are critical for liver health are low, such as selenium, zinc, and B vitamins. Now, there are some nutritional therapies and lifestyle strategies that can help if you have PBC. I'll be honest, it's going to be different for each individual, but here are some of the ways that I help my clients when they are living with PBC or they've just recently been diagnosed. And it is a similar approach as with other autoimmune conditions, but making sure my client is eating lots of anti-inflammatory foods, bringing in those 5 to 10 portions of vegetables, eating the rainbow. It's so important when you have this type of condition. So bringing in those cruciferous vegetables like the broccoli, the cabbage, the Brussels sprouts, bringing in leafy greens and oily fish. All these foods are going to support detoxification, but also help to reduce inflammation in the body. And when it comes to PBC, because it is linked to bile and it is linked to the liver, you want to be focused on bitter foods as well, things like dandelion and artichoke. And I like to consume this in teas. I started drinking artichoke leaf tea some time ago now, but I've really seen the benefits in my digestion, just generally in my health. I've incorporated other things as well, but I find just having quite a potent artichoke leaf tea every day has made such a difference in how I feel when I eat. I don't feel at all heavy when I eat any food. I probably need to get better with the amount of times I chew each bite of food, but I just feel very light after even some heavy meals. And that's a really good sign when it comes to your digestion. It's a sign that you are digesting the food, and it's not just lying heavy in your stomach. So that can be quite a nice thing to bring in. But you can also eat bitter tasting food like a rocket salad before dinner, and citrus fruit can also help with that, like grapefruit juice or lemon juice, and you can also take bitters. But when it comes to antioxidant rich foods, which are going to help bring down that oxidative stress, you're thinking about those dark coloured berries, pomegranate seeds, plums. Bringing those into the diet can be helpful as well. You don't want to overdo it just because of the sugar, but bringing in a handful of those types of foods into your diet. And I particularly like pomegranate seeds because they're not as high in sugar, and you compare that with, say, kefir or coconut yogurt and put some flaxseed on it, and then you've got a really nice dessert or a nice snack that you can have. But also incorporating choline-rich foods, which is found in eggs, because choline really helps to support fat metabolism and liver health. And there is something called phosphatidylcholine, which is a supplement that I will generally recommend if I feel that my client is struggling with fat digestion, and it can also help with the gut barrier as well. And it can help with your cell membrane. So it's such an amazing nutrient because it has this knock-on effect to so many different systems in the body. But you can get it from foods as well, and eggs are a really good source of that. When it comes to supplements, again, you really just need to take a personalised approach. So there isn't going to be a supplement that I will give to everybody with PBC. It really just depends on what the underlying issue is for them. But ordinarily, I will be looking at N-acetylcysteine, which is also referred to as NAC, because that is a glutathione precursor and that can help with the detoxification. Or you can take liposomal glutathione, which is a more direct source. It is the glutathione, and then you're not as reliant on your body to convert that to glutathione. So you can use both, or you can use one or the other, but obviously if you are thinking about taking any supplements, seek advice from a registered healthcare practitioner, because supplements aren't right for everyone, and you have to take into account your health history, the different medications that you might be on, and that is a factor. So these are supplements that I will recommend after checking for any contraindications for my clients. There is also some key herbs. You've probably heard of milk thistle, which contains silymarin, which protects the liver, and it also enhances glutathione production. And then one of my favorites is always vitamin D, because it helps to modulate the immune response. But with vitamin D, it only helps if you're deficient in vitamin D. You don't need to have extremely high levels, and actually that can cause more harm than good. But if your vitamin D levels are low, it could mean that your immune system is out of sync, and that's why you're having that autoimmune response in the body. So vitamin D is also a supplement that I will ordinarily use for my clients who have vitamin D deficiency. Well, I will always use it if they have vitamin D deficiency, but if we're not sure, then I might look at further testing to determine their vitamin D levels and then recommend vitamin D. On top of that, omega-3s can help to bring down inflammation, and again, it's just looking at your diet and thinking about the amount of omega-3s in your diet, and is it enough? Because we're so overwhelmed with all these other fats in our diet that the balance can easily tip to that pro-inflammatory state. So we do need to make sure that we're very conscious about the amount of omega-3s that we are consuming in our diet through oily fish, through flaxseed, through chia seed. But if we're not getting it enough through diet, then it is something that we need to supplement, because it is essential, which means that we need to consume it from our diet. Our body can't make it itself. And then when it comes to lifestyle changes, making sure that we're managing our stress with whatever technique works for you. And I'll be honest, it's taken me 10 years to continue to adapt the ways that I manage stress. And each year I feel like I'm getting better at doing that, but it's not something that can happen overnight. And it's something that you need to consider for yourself. And, the best place to start is just to think about times when you are feeling calm and what are you doing when you are feeling that sense of calm. Try and do as much of that as you can, because that is going to help calm your nervous system. On top of that, bringing in joy into your life and creativity can actually really help to calm the nervous system as well. So going through an exercise of writing down the things that you enjoy in life, and again, just doing a life review and thinking, how much of my time am I spending doing this? And even if it's just adding in 30 minutes to your week to start with of something that you enjoy doing can make a big difference. And you can build that up over time. I really don't think it works to just completely commit to something and think that you can make changes overnight. I find that when you slowly and gradually bring things in, that's when you stick to them for the long term. So that might be something to think about, especially if you feel like stress is a factor in your autoimmune condition. Also, engaging in regular movement can help to improve circulation and support liver function. And obviously you just need to work with your own capabilities around that. But detoxing and sweating and doing cardiovascular type exercise can be extremely helpful. And then avoiding environmental toxins as much as possible when you have a condition like PBC, because we know toxicity affects the liver, and when the liver is overburdened with toxicity, it's more likely that this autoimmune response could occur. And also, if you have PBC, your liver is already under stress and you just don't want to add to that, outside of the autoimmune response. And generally for anybody, we want to look at lowering the toxins in our environment and in our food and in our water and in the air we're breathing as much as possible. And there are various ways that you can do that. You can go to the Environmental Working Group's website, check your products on there, have a think about the food you're eating, which foods that can you buy that are organic, and use the Dirty Dozen list and the Clean 15 list, which is on the Environmental Working Group's page. Go through that, use that as guidance. Have a review of your home, the rooms that you're spending the most time in. Is there any mold toxicity? Is there any chemical toxicity? Opening windows daily is a nice way to bring in fresh air into your house, and rather than having stagnant air. So there are many things that you can do around that, and just going through your cleaning and self-care products and lowering the amount of toxins as much as you can. And I found this whole process very overwhelming when I was first starting out in making changes for my own health. But again, I did it gradually. And for example, I was using a frying pan which has a coating on it, a plastic coating, and I was using it most of the time. So that was the first thing that I knew I needed to replace. Or the water bottle that I was drinking out of every day, I just changed that to glass. So what are you using the most of? What are you putting on your skin every day? Where are you sitting every day? These are the things to consider, rather than trying to do everything at once. Just do it a step at a time and prioritize what you're going to change. And that, again, can make a big difference. Now, there is some emerging studies into PBC and gut health and mitochondrial function, and dysbiosis can increase intestinal permeability, which can exacerbate autoimmune activity, which I've talked about on many other episodes. And that can impair mitochondrial energy and contribute to fatigue. So that may be a factor in PBC as well. And then there's also research that will look into certain dietary protocols. For example, certain legumes traditionally excluded in autoimmune diets have actually been shown to improve liver markers in some studies, and that was a recent study. So it just shows again that we need that level of personalisation when it comes to our health. I know lots of people that have done well with the AIP diet, but obviously there are studies out there that show that legumes can be helpful for some people with liver conditions. So You've got to do what's right for you. And I eat legumes from a gut perspective, from a fiber perspective, and the plant-based proteins. I personally feel that they are working for me. And obviously there is this study to support that, but it depends how you feel when you have legumes. And you can do food sensitivity checks around that as well if you wanted to look into that further. And you can keep a food and symptom journal to keep check of which foods you might be reacting to and might be causing an inflammatory response. Now, as I said at the beginning, there is this link between PBC and fatty liver and high cholesterol. This issue stems from the bile flow impairment that happens with PBC. So to address this issue, it's just to emphasize to eat those fiber-rich foods like flax seeds or chia seeds, which help support cholesterol metabolism. You can include liver-friendly foods like turmeric, beetroot and citrus fruits, and minimize refined carbohydrates and sugar as much as possible to help to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce that fat buildup in the liver. And regular exercise as well can be really important about that. So I know we've covered lots on today's episode, and there's actually far more that I would love to share with you about PBC. But as I said, I will be linking to that article about the link between gut dysbiosis and PBC. Have a read of that. If you have any questions, you can pop over to my Instagram account, which is at the Autoimmune Nutritionist, or join my free group, the Autoimmune Forum on Facebook. I love to hear from you over there. You can ask any questions in the group. We're sharing recipes. At the moment, I'm sharing a series on hair growth essentials focused on alopecia areata. So I would love to see you over there if you are living with alopecia and you would like to learn a bit more about things that you can do to help with that. Today, we've explored the multifaceted nature of PBC, from its root cause and symptoms to the research and some of the management strategies that I use in my clinic with my clients. But again, it needs to be right for you. So remember some of the risk factors, especially if you have symptoms, that you're more likely to develop PBC between your 40s and 50s. It's more at risk for people who have Sjögren's or thyroid disorders, and personal care is absolutely key to minimize exposure to toxins, which could add burden on the body. So I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, like I mentioned, please pop over to my Instagram account. You can ask those over there. If not, have a fantastic rest of your week, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time. And remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.